Dopamine reallocation is probably the biggest cheat code I've ever found to becoming successful, and the top 3, 4, 5 most successful guys I know who make hundreds of millions of dollars a year, they all do dopamine reallocation, and you've probably never heard of it, so I'm going to explain it. Now, quickly, if you can't sit and watch a 10-minute video without getting distracted or clicking away, then I'm sorry, but you're done for, you're cooked. So full screen the video. If your attention span is that weak that you cannot watch this video in full, I'm sorry, but there's no point in you even trying to become successful. So now that I've said that, let's get into it. It's nearly impossible to become successful when you have a high dopamine baseline. And what this means is the level of stimulation that you expose yourself to will determine the level of typical average dopamine in your brain. And we could track this on a map from, on a graph here from 100 all the way down to 0. And someone at 100 is someone that is eating lots of junk food, someone that's watching loads of porn or playing video games, or maybe they're watching short form content, or they're doing drugs, or they're drinking. Behaviors that are hyperstimulating they raise your dopamine baseline. And the baseline is basically, what is the threshold for you to feel adequately stimulated? Now, someone down here with a significantly lower level of stimulation, this might be just a person that watches podcasts, maybe they read all the time, maybe they watch long-form survival videos on YouTube that have no music, maybe they just, maybe they exercise for dopamine, etc. The problem is when you're up here, which is where you probably are right now, it's real tough to get money and success, because all of the behaviors that lead to money and success, like work, like reading, like learning, they are low dopamine behaviors. And so when you sit down to do the work, or you sit down to read a book, or you sit down to do something that isn't instantly rewarding, that, satiates your craving for this chemical, well, it's impossible. And it really is difficult. And so what you need to learn to do if you want to be successful, which is exactly what I'm going to show you how to do in this video, is bring your baseline as low as you can so that you can be adequately stimulated by things like work. For example, I am a low dopamine person. And what that means is when I make a YouTube video like this, I find this to be incredibly rewarding and stimulating, which is literally for me just work, right? And so when you can learn to make work easy by lowering your dopamine baseline, you can get rich as soon as possible. So the question is how do we do this? Well, the easiest thing to realize is that let's say that you have what we call 100 units of dopamine. Okay, and what you've probably tried to do before is you've probably tried to do what we would call monk mode or an equivalent. And monk mode is typically what happens in January, where someone does the whole, new year, new me thing, and, they try and get rid of all their bad behaviors, and they suddenly try and quit pornography and their video games and everything. They just throw it out, and they do that for about 4 days, and then they relapse into all the old bad behaviors. You're along the right lines with the right intention, and it's good that you have a basic psychological drive to fulfill this transformation. But doing this with an extreme protocol where you just try and remove all these stimulations, it's basically impossible, because your brain goes a little bit haywire because it wants this stimulation. So let me do a little experiment with you here. So let's say that your average dopaminergic stimulation level is 100 out of 100, which it might be for you. You could have a 200, 300, 400 out of 1,000, but let's just say it's 100. And let's say, 20 units are in video games, which means that 20% of your daily stimulation comes from gaming. Let's say that another 30% comes from short form content. Let's say that you get another 10 from, social media. Right, and that leaves us with 60. Let's say you get another 20 from alcohol, and let's say you get another 10 from smoking, and then let's say that you get another 10 that you can see down there from what's another bad behavior that people do? Let's just say weed, right? So you're in a pretty bad place if this is where your dopaminergic stimulation comes from, right? But here's the thing. When you are used to 100 units of stimulation, you're happy. So if you try to reduce this, it makes you a very, very, very sad person. And when you try and bring your dopamine state down, this is where you start getting depressed, and it's where you start getting anxious because, your brain doesn't have context, and your brain feels like it's safe or like it's satisfied when it is adequately stimulated at the level that it's used to. And when you start taking away stimulation from the brain, it kind of short circuits a little bit, and you start getting all these negative emotions. You start getting anxious, you start getting depressed, you start getting bored, you start getting lethargic, all these negative, painful things come in, and those are the triggers that bring the behaviors back in so that you don't have to feel the pain anymore. And so what we need to learn to do is bring this baseline down from 100 to, say, maybe just 20, so we can find things like work, reading, exercise, the boring stuff, basically, fun. So here's the problem. Let's say that you try, I'm gonna use a pink highlighter here to determine getting rid of a behavior. So let's say that you try and remove video games and you try and remove short form content at the same time. What this does, if we have 20 units of our stimulation in video games and 30 units in short form content, what this does is overnight, over the course of like a couple of days, we've gone from if I just bring this up here, so if we try and get rid of video games and short form content, then what happens is overnight we've gone from a 100 baseline to a 50. And this is like basically half of your stimulation has been cut away. And this is going to make you very, very sad. It's going to make you irate. It's going to make you depressed. It's going to make you anxious. It's going to make you feel weird because suddenly there's this chasm, this void of stimulation that needs to be filled. And because you're not adequately equipped with dealing with this pain, what's going to happen is you're going to pick it back up and you're going to start watching the content again. You're going to start playing video games. So what you want to do to reduce your baseline and find doing the hard things easy is just try and bring yourself down like 10 to 15 units at a time. And so when you're trying to reduce your dopamine baseline, this is really going to be like a 12 to 24 month affair. You know, we don't want to do this extreme monk mode, get rid of it all and, you know, do the 75 hard challenge for 365 days straight. It doesn't work. What you want to do instead is try and do this over the course of like a year. Right, maybe 2 years is quite a long time. You can probably do it in like maybe 6 to 12 months. But every single month, you just want to knock away 5 to 10 points. And if you bring your baseline down slowly, you don't notice as much. But here's the thing. So let's say that you want to get rid of one of these habits. So what I would do is, let's say you want to get rid of video games, because that's a pretty damn harmful thing. So, you know, let's say we want to get rid of this. Here is the problem. So when we get rid of video games, we've gone from a 100 unit baseline level and we've taken away 20 units, which means we're left with 80, which means that we have a deficit of 20%, which means that you're going to be 20% more angry, you know, more sad and more depressed and more anxious, you know, for a while. You're going to be pretty upset about this because, you know, 20% of your stimulation levels have been removed. So here's what we do. You reduce your stimulation levels by this 20% that we can see here. But what you then do is you pick up a good behavior at the same time that stimulates you just enough, just a little bit. So if, for example, we remove video games like this, which means we take away 20%, and we replace this with something like cold showers. Now, cold showers might be a unit stimulation level of 5. It might only, it's not, you know, cold showers are incredibly stimulating, by the way. Cold showers can actually produce as much dopamine in your brain as cocaine. And that's actually a scientific fact. You can look it up. But it's not quite that simple. It's a little reductive, but the same level of stimulation can occur depending on the whatever. But anyway, so you bring cold showers in, which means that in the process of removing video games, we've lost 20 here, but we've gained 5, which means that our net loss is only 15. And what this means is when you remove a really stimulating bad behavior and you replace it with a very good behavior that's significantly less stimulating, you reduce the amount of discrepancy, right? And so, you know, if we're going, you know, from, if we just plot this on a graph here, let me just shrink this down so this becomes a little bit easier. Okay, put it over there. So if this is our stimulation and we're trying to go from 100 to say like a level of 10, I'm probably sat at like a 15 or 20, right? And, you know, the first port of call is getting you down to this red line here, which is like 80. Well, we lose 20, but if we gain 5, then we come to 70, we come to 85. But this is good. The good thing is because some behaviors which are highly stimulating are really good for you. So like cold exposure, for example, is one of them, or work. Like I find work to be incredibly, incredibly stimulating. Or, you know, let's say that you just have sex, like healthy sex with a person that you love. Like that's an incredibly stimulating thing, but it's not bad for you. It doesn't create like these weird neuroses and these weird depressions and anxieties that you're used to with these highly stimulating behaviors. The same premise could be true with, you know, maybe you fast for like a day and then you eat like a really healthy meal. Like that healthy meal will be incredibly stimulating, but it doesn't mean it's bad, right? So when we remove, we need to make up the difference, because if you lose 20 or 30 units overnight, it's almost too much for you to deal with. But if you remove, let's get another example here. So let's say that, you know, you want to get rid of your short form content addiction, and this is like a third of your stimulation levels. Let's say that you're a junkie and you're spending like, you know, 3-4 hours a day on short form content, just scroll. Well, if you try and remove that, that's a lot to remove, right? So let's say we try and remove 30 units. If you remove short form content, what I would then do is, you know, remove the short form content, but then try and pick up the gym or exercise or something like this, because gym or exercise might give you plus 15 stimulation, which means the discrepancy here is only 15. So if we remove 30 units of a bad behavior, but we introduce a good behavior that adds 15 units, then what this means is we are only net down 15 units. And trust me, it's significantly easier to stick to your good behaviors when you're only losing 15 units as opposed to 30. Like, this level here is like 2 times as hard as this level here. And so what you need to realize is that your brain wants to keep the level of stimulation you have now, because that's where it feels safe, that's where it feels stimulated. It feels incredibly good to feel, stimulated at the level because that's where you feel safe. Your brain knows that survival exists at this level of stimulation, which is why it wants to keep it there. So you can, if you want to change your life, you need to change your, neurochemistry. There's lots of other stuff to change, but this is a core component of changing your life and becoming successful, right? So just when you take something away, add something healthy that stimulates you. It's never like the gym and reading and exercising and cold exposure or hanging out with friends or finding a girlfriend, or these good behaviors are never going to be anywhere near as stimulating as the bad things. But when you keep them, when you add them, it reduces the discrepancy level. And when you reduce that discrepancy level, you find it significantly easier. And so what I would do, and I've literally done this myself, because I used to be addicted to video games. I used to eat junk food all the time. I used to watch pornography when I was younger. Fortunately enough, I've got rid of that habit. All sorts of stuff. Like I would do, I never smoked weed or anything like that, but I used to drink sometimes as well. I used to smoke a lot, and very high levels of stimulation. And every time I removed a bad one, I would add a good one. And it would still be painful. It's still really difficult to lower your baseline because, you're irate and you're like, I just want to do something. But when you bring something good in, when you remove something bad, you slightly reduce the net stimulation level. And before you know it, after doing this for maybe 6, 9, 12 months, all of your bad behaviors are gone and you replace them with good behaviors, and your dopamine baseline is way down, which means that you find things that make you successful way easier, and you no longer crave or want to even do these bad things because they make you go a little bit insane. So if I tried to watch an hour of TikTok, it would make me feel anxious and uncomfortable, because the same thing is true with your brain. You don't like to be overstimulated above and beyond what you already are right now. And you probably noticed this in yourself before, where you have your baseline dopaminergic level of stimulation that you're used to, and going anything above that makes you feel a little uncomfortable. The other day I went to a party, a beach party here in Dubai, and it was really loud house music, and it was incredibly a party atmosphere, loads of alcohol, all this stuff, and it was incredibly stimulating. And the day after, I had to just lay in my room and stare at a wall. I didn't even want to pick up my phone to check any messages or anything, because I'd been so overstimulated. And so the inverse is true as well. But that is how you lower your dopamine baseline and you remove your bad behaviors without relapsing into them. And if you pick something really stimulating that drives 25, 30, 45% of your stimulation in your life, you need to compensate with new behaviors that stimulate you adequately enough so that you don't quit and relapse, because the net negative baseline change, the smaller that is, the easier it is to get rid of bad behaviors. So that's it. Bye.